Hello.
Heyo.
Hi. So we had a fantastic 3 sessions this morning, actually. We started off with international student athlete transition, going pro. Then the second session was about mobility and flexibility, a ton of good advice. Definitely go to the replay to check that out. And the last session was about finances and, how to make your money work, what to invest in, how to create second income as an athlete. And now we're looking forward to the discussion with our agents here. And I'm going to just kick myself right out. So Ryan, you can take over. Just going to make you host.
Thank you. All right. So before we get started really and get far into this, I want to take a moment to, first of all, I got to get Therese in this. So Therese, if you're calling in, try it again and I'll get you in. But why don't you take it away, Karolina, and introduce yourself, your background in sport, your business, and how you think that applies to today's topic in about under a minute.
Well, my name is Karolina Blanco, and I'm the Executive Director of Sports International Group. It's a sports agency located in Maryland. I've been working with the firm for about 13 years. And although I'm not a certified agent, I've been in the business firsthand, helping my boss grow the business. We started out representing female basketball players, and now we have expanded to men's football and men's basketball. My role specifically has been developing the women's side and overseeing operations for the rest of the departments. I've been working with athletes one-on-one, my entire time since I've been with the company. So my knowledge and experience is really, hands-on.
Thank you. And welcome, Therese. I'll get to you first. Matt, take it away. Or don't. Reese, you take it away.
Okay, my name is Therese Crawford, and I played professional volleyball for over 10 years. And I had during that time 3 different agents, and 1 year was didn't have agent representation. So that's the experience that I'm bringing to this. Also, my husband is currently a volleyball agent. So I get to see both sides. I saw the side from being a player, having an agent, not having an agent, and now the agent side point of view as my husband is an agent.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Matt, can we hear you now?
I can only hear you.
No, I can hear you now. Just make sure, give your intro under a minute and grab some headphones because we'll definitely get some feedback without headphones.
I'll grab them in 2 seconds. I'll do the intro and then I'll do it. So my name is Matt Cole, and I am the current founder and CEO of Sporple. So we're a platform that connects agents and clubs and athletes anywhere in the world. So essentially the model is that talent needs to be discovered regardless of where it is in the world, and talent needs to be connected with opportunity. So we allow athletes to create a custom profile that connects them with agents and clubs and anywhere in the world. Prior to that, I was an agent for 10 years. So I was primarily focused on rugby union, rugby league and cricket. Sold the agency that I started in 2013. And prior to that, I was a rugby player myself, and I was lucky enough to play in the UK and a couple of other places. So kind of saw the agent athlete model on both sides and saw the dynamics that are involved there.
Okay, thank you. So now everybody's introed, and just to give people a little bit of background on myself, I just happen to be co-hosting this and an agent. Also, I am a player though, which is a little bit different situation. I've played volleyball since 1997. When I was 16, I went pro in 2002. I found an agency that I could get abroad with, and I saw that there are a lot of issues with agents, teams, and players, and there are a lot of problems, and I think Matt over there at Sporple is attending to some of those problems, and I really like what you're doing, and we're definitely gonna have to talk offline about that more. But my goal with today's topic and moderating this is really to get out answers to questions that athletes may know they have or may not know they should have, So really getting started, let's just talk about the agent-player relationship. Whenever you're making that transition from amateur sports to professional sports, it's good to have someone to help you, whether that's someone that's legally licensed as an agent in your sport, or whether that's somebody who's very experienced by maybe playing that sport at a professional level. You need someone to mentor you along that process, because it's not the best idea to just like jump in to the deep end and you don't know how to swim yet. So the agent relationship is basically somebody who facilitates knowledge to you and interactions with a team or sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. So in your opinion, Karolina, what is the role of an agent if you were to define it basically?
It's a loaded question. I think it really, I can only speak for the way that we handle it in our office. And, the relationship that we have with our players, a lot of it depends on the player. There are some relationships that are really, they call us when they're retired to just check in and have conversations. Other players that when we represent them, we never hear from them unless it's just, sending them to, overseas or negotiating their contract. Other players, they need a little bit more TLC. It varies. But the way that we handle it is that my boss, his name is Boris, he handles all the contract negotiations. And I kind of come in behind him and kind of manage everything else. So if the player has a question or concern over the contract that maybe my boss isn't available, they have me to lean on. So there's really three people that our players have to communicate with at all times. So it's not just about, signing that deal, because really the job starts when you sign the deal. That's when the work starts, because everything that follows that is, are you getting paid on time? Are you getting taken care of? Do you have everything you need? Is your apartment clean? Is your visa valid, for the amount of time that you're going to be there? You get injured. There's all these things that come into play that really, it starts when you sign that deal.
Thank you so much for that. And Matt? I mean, the relationship for me is basically kind of one of those things where it's really important to kind of manage the expectations from both sides. So one of the things that I kind of experienced, particularly more on the agent side of it, was the expectations of the athlete going from that amateur to that professional. What is their expectation of their agent to facilitate? Now, I had clients that effectively wanted you to be another mum and dad and look after, things that were kind of well outside the scope of what a general or a normal agent would be. Now, I think if you've got the expectation the agent's going to be a mentor and a sort of a second sort of father figure or anything like that, you've got to be upfront with that and sort of establish that up front. Now, if you just want your agent to negotiate the best professional contracts or facilitate, the commercial aspects or the playing deals and those sorts of things, then you have to be upfront with that as well. And I know certain athletes prefer that. Like, some clients I didn't hear from 18 months. When their deal was up, they'd call me and we'd renegotiate the deal. That was perfect for them, and that suited them as an individual. Other players, wouldn't go and buy a car if they didn't check with you first, or wouldn't go and, buy a new pair of boots if they wouldn't check with you first. So I think you've got to be really clear with what the expectations on both sides of the agent-athlete relationship are. I was very lucky to have an agent, the relationship where some of the guys were at my weddings and things like this. So you do develop a very close bond with your clients, because they're effectively giving you a very strange relationship where you're in charge of negotiating their playing contracts and effectively their livelihood for that period of their career. So I think having a conversation up front when you first sit down with an agent and saying, this is what my expectations are, this is how I see the role playing out, and then work out whether that person's the right fit to take on that role. But the expectation part, I think, is something that often gets mismanaged pretty early on.
A lot coming out early here about communication, and we're going to get to that. That's really important. Therese, what is your experience? Let's go from just the player side and then go from the aspect of what you see with your husband, Boris. So, Karolina, that's so funny. I was like, wait, is that her boss?
Another Boris?
So as a player, what was your relationship experience with your agents? And then we'll handle the second part.
Okay, I found all of this interesting because in my experience and what I see a lot of times in volleyball is that the player-agent relationship is much more business, just get the contract, that the players are just looking for an agent initially to just get them a contract. Who's going to get me the highest contract? And then I'll go with that person. It's not even really to what an agent can do for you. It's just that person has some deal and they're offering it, and who's offering the most money. That's what's most common in volleyball. And then and what you're doing, Ryan, I applaud you for that. You are actually mentoring your players and that you take it to a whole nother level. But you are a minority, I know, in as far as a volleyball agent is concerned. And my view as a player, and what I was and what I know now, so I'll look from hindsight. What I wish I would have understood is that your agent can be your best tool to with any issues that you have with your team. So your agent is your go-to with any issues, any problems, any concerns, all of that. It's always best if you have an agent to use them and to talk with them first before you make any connection with your team, or before you deal with anybody with the management or anything like that. That your agent is the person that you should go to first. So that is your biggest asset on the team. That's what I wish I would have understood.
Thank you. And I mean, now that we kind of understand, because people watching, I want to take a moment just to say thank you for watching. And for sure, if you hear any golden nuggets, let's say, of advice, right, that your friends, your peers could really use, make sure you click that share last 30-second button up there and share it to either Twitter, Facebook, or both, with some comment about why you think that's important for them to hear that. And moving forward, we really want to work on getting you answers to questions that you for sure have. And like I said, you may get some answers to questions you didn't know you had. And if you have those questions, all you got to do is in the send message down there, bottom right, you can click on that / in the corner to ask a question. You can see the question there, or you can type it out /Q and then write your question. They'll go up on the left. We'll answer them for the last 10 minutes or so of this blab. But if we get through the majority of everything, we'll answer it before. So what I would like to talk about next is now we understand how an agent-player relationship can work. Like Matt said, some are more supportive at mentoring, some are not. They're more just get the job done and not a lot of communication because there's that trust that they're going to get it done. Now, it depends on what you need. And also, I think it depends on the sport that you're in, because some sports are handled much differently than others. Volleyball is very unregulated. There's a lot of support for basketball and football players and possibly rugby players. Is there, Matt?
He's out.
Darn. So what I want to talk about is I want to shift to when you are looking to select an agent, if you choose to go that direction. What are the qualities that you as a player, I'll let you take this first, Karolina, as an ex-player, what qualities were you looking for in an agent?
I think you want to know how long they've been in business for. I think you want to know how many clients they represent. And I think you want to know where you fit in their client roster, right? Not every agency is for every player. So for example, in our agency, we represent, the top WNBA players in the world. Now, so a player that's coming out from maybe a low Division I school may not fit our roster. It's not to say that they're not a great player, but that's not the type of player that we specialize in representing. So we wouldn't be beneficial to them. We're not looking at jobs in Portugal, Germany, Berlin, which are the low-level leagues. We're looking at jobs in, Russia, Spain, France, Turkey, which are the top leagues. So you need to know as a player where you fit. And, it's a reality check, right? Every player thinks that they're the best and that they should be playing in Russia and making, $30,000 a month. That's not really realistic. That's not the type of player you are. And you want to also ask, one of the questions I think is who has left you as a client, right? And why did they leave you? So I think it's important to do your research, of the agent, and just, are they certified? Which is a simple question. You think everybody's certified, but there are some agents that aren't. They're just, there to take your money. You don't know that, you have to go on the FIBA website, FIBA Europe for basketball, and you can look at the client. You can look at the agents that are registered. So you want to know these basic, simple things before you go into, when you go into that meeting, so you know what to ask.
Thank you. And
So good.
Therese. Yeah.
That is so good
Therese. Yeah.
That is so good because, first of all, I love what she said about knowing where you fit on the agent's roster, because one agent that you see and, they're coming out with a great deal for you that they have, but when you need them, they might not be there because you are not high on you're not making them enough money. You're not high on their list. And if, you see who they're representing and then they come to you with a deal, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be someone that they're looking at, that you're important to them, that you're the most important to them. And you want an agent that's going to be there and available for you. And the other thing I love that she said is also to pay attention if they're registered or not, if they are certified or not. And volleyball now has that. A lot of people don't know that volleyball FIVB now has that an agent needs to be FIVB certified in order to be able to represent you if there's any problems later. And you need to also know that this is the part of being the wife, because this wasn't a fact when I was playing. But if you have any problems getting your money later, if they're not FIVB certified, they don't have the right in order to go and litigate for you in court and litigate for you with the FIVB. So that's something that you definitely want to look into, regardless of who the agent is. Make sure that the agent is certified, or at least they're represented by a certified agency. So let's say that they're an agency, but they're an agency for they're just a part of a bigger agency. Make sure that agency is represented. And I think it has to be agent. So what I just said, it has to be agent.
Yeah, just getting a little bit more into that, because it is so new. And Karolina, I know that this is outside of the realm of basketball, but there are going to be a lot of volleyball players, since I know I'm pushing this through my network and Reese is doing it through hers. And I want to touch on that because it is so new. And I love that they did this, because part of the vision and reason why I started the agency is to create this solution to the issue of agents that are there just to take your money. They want to get in, get a contract quick, get the money from the team up front, or possibly you or both. And then when when problems arise, they are gone with the wind. Okay. So what I was hoping for is the World's Federation to step in and say, hey, we need this to be more regulated. We need to get these players the help they need, the representation they need, and get rid of what I like to call paper pushers. And so now, with having this agency that I've built up over the last few years, I'm not doing it because I want to be an agent. I definitely don't. As soon as I can not be doing this and have somebody with the business who can be the agent and do all that great stuff, I would love to just be the mentor. That's my deal. That's what Beyond Athletic is all about. But I just want to throw this out there, and I'll throw it to you, Karolina, to get feedback on this. When problems arise and players are not able to contact with their agent because of whatever reasons.
That just doesn't exist in our office.
Yeah. But as another agency,
well, let me talk.
Handle that. Yeah, let me talk. What do you see in the world of professional sports, in basketball, and maybe what you've heard from other sports, as solutions to, if you're in a contract with an agent who's not doing their job, how can you break it? How can you get legal representation to help you with that? Any comments on that?
Yeah, two things. Number one, where volleyball is now is probably where basketball was a few years ago. I mean, I've been with Boris for 13 years, but when I started working with him, it was very cut and dry. It was like, here's your contract, your flight is booked, you're getting on a plane, and good luck to you. And I just thought it was very odd. For me, I'm coming in and I'm like, I don't, who's picking them up and where are they going? And you're trusting all these people that you've never met to fulfill their end on the other side. So now, over the past course of the 13 years, it's really kind of grown, and now it's different for women's basketball. But hearing what you guys are dealing in volleyball, I don't think that women's basketball was that far off, 13, 14, 15 years ago. So I think there is going to be growth for you guys.
Good to know.
But as opposed to the question about you can't get a hold of your agent, I mean, I don't know that experience in our office. That's just not. I mean, my boss turns his phone off at night, but I don't. So I'm on 24/7. There's always a way to get a hold of us. But if you're having very poor communication with your agent, I think the right thing to do is communicate and say, listen, I'm not very happy with our communication. I'd like to, work on it. Maybe schedule a call with your agent. monthly, say, I would like to talk to you once a month. So schedule that time that you have with your agent, once a month. What day of the week works for you in time, to kind of check in. And if that's not working, then you know what? Then at the end of your term or whatever, or maybe in the middle, say, listen, I think we need to go in different directions. This isn't really working for me. And be confident. I think what happens is a lot of players aren't confident. They're like, oh, but they're such a nice person. And this isn't about being nice. This is about a business, right? At the end of the day, I'm nice too. But listen, business is business, and you have to make your money. And if one person isn't holding their side of the deal, like, it is what it is. I mean, if the agent wouldn't think twice of cutting a player if they weren't, fulfilling their end of the bargain, let me tell you, we wouldn't think twice of being like, you know what, you're not doing a great job for us. I think we need to, reevaluate our relationship. So
thank you so much. And Therese, I know, Therese, you've had some experience with this. I know, as being your agent for a couple of years there, that you've gone through this, and you know that when we were working together, that there are some things that you can do to help the situation, and you can be proactive, like Karolina was just saying. And I think that's a vital takeaway from what she just said, is that you should be proactive. If something's not going according to plan, don't just sit back and just hope and go along for the ride, when that ride could be 1 or 2 years, depending on where you're from, how long you've signed that contract for. So in your experience, what are some solutions for that?
Yeah, that goes back to when you're choosing an app. It's better to be preventative than to be already in it and trying to get out of it. So I think a big thing was also, which we didn't mention, was know that your agent, this is his job. Now, Ryan is really, and I will say this honestly, this is not because I know Ryan. Ryan is not the norm, that he has his agency. He's also an athlete, and that he has, and then he's available to his agents, not to his players. None of his players, you could ask them, none of his players are going to say that he's not available to him. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. But a lot of so-called agents out there have other things that they're doing. They're not just specifically agents. And if that's so, what level does that weigh onto how available are they to you? How much are they invested in you? How much can they do for you when you get into a pickle? Can they be there? Can they fly out and shake hands and negotiate or deal with the problem, whatever it needs to be? Can they communicate with the manager of your team? What if your manager speaks another language? And all of a sudden when a problem happens, he doesn't know English, because I've had that happen. I don't speak English, and there's nobody in the office that speaks English now. So your agent, where does he have somebody there that can, from that country, representing him in that country, that can go there and negotiate and deal with the problem for you? So those are all things that you want to be preventative about and think about ahead of time before you get into your contract. Once you get into your contract, the one thing that you want to do is to not go and offend the people that you're there with. Remember that you're in a business, that you're in another country, that if you are a woman, we as Americans need to recognize this. Just because we're from America and Americans are treated equally and are able to speak their minds, and that's not seen as offensive. When you're in another country, that might be seen as very offensive. So that's why you have an agent to deal with that. So you can be proactive by going to your agent and talking about how you guys are going to deal with the problem. Please don't make the mistakes that I made. And even though you're right and you're justified in your problem and going to them, don't go directly to them. That's why you have an agent, because in the end, it's only going to be bad for you.
Yes, it does. And Matt, I'm glad you got back on.
I think I'm in the middle of Silicon
difficulties. Yeah,
I'm in the middle of Silicon Valley and I can't get reception. Who would have thought? I just wanted to say something around that managing that kind of expectation, or that communication flow between when you appoint an agent, and I know some agents are accountants or they do have other jobs. I think it goes back to that question you asked up front, like, does my agent have the capacity to manage me? And then to the point around having another job, I'd have one of the first things I did when I started my agency was told people that I only do this for a job. I don't do anything else. I don't, coach soccer. I don't do anything else. This is my full-time job. And what that allows you to do is have really accurate market information. So if you're an agent for a team sport or a competition that has multiple divisions, multiple leagues, like I was based in Australia, but 40% of my business was either in Japan and 20% was in Europe. So even though I don't speak Japanese, we employed people to make sure that we had accurate market knowledge.
Yeah.
We had translators. We had to make sure that when a client who might have arrived from, the Pacific Islands, was landing on his first day in Japanese. It was an unrealistic expectation for him to land there and know anything about the culture, anything about the language. And it's, I guess, there's also an expectation of the player. You should learn basic either language skills or cultural sort of intricacies before you arrive. But not every player does that, and that's fine. But I think if you're going to appoint an agency to represent you, market knowledge is one of the greatest assets they'll have. You will only get that from experience in it or being dedicated full time. So I can't accurately advise clients now on what the Japanese rugby market's like and the French rugby market's like, because I haven't been in it for 3 or 4 years. So it's an unrealistic expectation. So when you go and appoint an agent, if you're playing in a sport that only has the domestic competition, then that's fine. A local person can probably accurately advise you. If you're playing in a sport that has different timelines, different cultural sort of deadlines for signing contracts, different contracts for expiration dates, different rollover dates, all those sorts of things, you make sure that your agent is dedicated to being an agent full time. Because, another side of that is being available for a 3 a.m. phone call if the player's been called over drink driving, and that's happened to me a couple of times. They're kind of social things, but I think at the very core of it, if your agent doesn't know and can't advise you, if you miss out on a domestic contract, what your options are internationally, you're only getting 50% of the representation.
Excellent. And I think that is a fantastic segue there about if your player is getting pulled over for drunk driving or doing something, if the player just needs help in any type of way and they're calling you at whatever time. If a player gets left behind, their team leaves them and goes to a match trying to get them fired, what do you do? Which has happened to a player that I know. So I think it's a good segue to talk about what mistakes first, because I would like to talk about the negative aspects so we can get the takeaways, the positive ways to work with agents. So for athletes out there, they understand what are the wrong things they do to work with agents and what are the right things they should do. Karolina, you haven't gone for a bit. Why don't you take this one away? Maybe 2-3 things, whatever.
The wrong things that players do while working with us? Not communicating is the number one. I mean, we've had players, we just had a player 2 weeks ago, just get up and leave. She just left, gone. She didn't go up to practice, one of my clients messaged me and say, hey, so-and-so isn't here today. I'm like, what do you mean they're not here? Go check in the apartment. They left.
Moved out.
Left the country.
Wow.
So communication is number one. Number two is, like stated earlier, just talking to the club in advance without talking to us first. Before you go and talk to a club or your management at the club, let us know what it is that you're trying to communicate, because maybe it is better for us to do it than you to do it. Sometimes we'll say, you know what, if you need an extra day off, just talk to coach, see what they say, and then come back to us. We'll let you know if it's appropriate for you to take that on or for us to take that on. Or sitting out. Let's say a team hasn't paid you in the allotted time that they have. They have a grace period, at least in our contracts, where they can, pay you late up to 30 days. So let's say they're a week late and you want to sit out. You can't sit out because they have a grace period. So some players don't know that, and they'll just say, oh, I'm not practicing today, I'm not going. And it's no, you have to go. So it's when players take things into their own hands that kind of make our jobs a little bit more difficult. Now, we're equipped to handle that. And, we can call the coach or call our partner in the country and kind of work it out. But we don't want the players handling things on their own. Another mistake players make is sometimes they don't speak up when they should. So I've had players stay in apartments that they don't have internet for 2 months. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? Well, I didn't know. So it's kind of knowing that fine line of what you should be communicating, to us, which is pretty much everything. If you don't have internet for 2 months, that's not acceptable. If you are dropped off, from your flight and no one asked you if you're hungry and you have food in your apartment or where to go, that's not acceptable either. So it's just keeping that
in basketball,
it's just keeping that communication open. And there's a time difference, but like I said, so if it's 10 in the morning there, it's probably 4 in the morning my time. But when I wake up, I'll check the phone, it'll be the first thing I see. I can say, hey, okay, what's going on? Let's check in. I don't know, just keeping the communication flow open at all times.
And Matt.
I think you hit it spot on. As an agent, you can't fix a problem you don't know about. So, if someone sits on, it's happened to me too, like someone sits on no internet, you know, like no electricity, no couch or something for 2 weeks. I can't fix that if I don't know about it. Like, so, I mean, that's enormously, you know, important for both sides of it. I think, like, one of the other things too is, like, majority of our clients, I believe, or my ex-clients, they're in team sports. So it's important that you have that conversation around their role in a team. You know, they might have been a great amateur. If they move into a professional, there's a big adjustment. There's an adjustment of your place in the team. There's an adjustment in the learning that they're going to have. So I think the communication again around, if you're going to be a professional athlete and your lifespan is 10, 12, 13, 15 years, whatever that might be, you've got to understand, if you get a bad first deal and you act like a brat about it, your chances of getting a second deal go down dramatically, because the majority of sports, although, you know, they're enormous with hundreds of millions of people playing it, only 5% make the top. So it's a small world at the top. And if you act like a brat in your first or second contract, that's going to get back to someone. So just be really so that self-actualize where you are in the program, where you are in the plan, and where you are in your career. You know, not everyone's going to be a superstar at 22. A lot of, you know, guys and girls are superstars at 28. So manage your career. Be aware of how long your career is going to go for. But I think your first point, the communication when things are wrong. Know that the agent can have an unemotional conversation with the team management, and a player is going to probably jump up and down and be emotional about things.
Yes.
The agent's going to be able to digest it. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, so just a couple of takeaways before, Reese, I get to you. But this communication factor is so important. And to go back to another part in what Karolina was saying in the beginning about and Matt supported, you cannot deal with problems as an agent if you aren't aware of them. So one of the things that I think a solution to this problem is A, communicating it, but B, the moment you get to a team, let's say, if we're talking about problems when you arrive somewhere, especially in foreign countries, right? The moment you get there, there are a couple of things that you should be taking down and making sure you have records of. A, you want to definitely take records of all expenses that you have, right? But B, you want to, when you get to your flat, you want to take a video. I mean, one video walking through the whole flat, pointing out any issues that you see, et cetera, et cetera. You can even take one of the newspapers from that day and put it on the video so they can see the proof. Because I'm telling you, teams are creative with how they get around this stuff. To show that this is the state of the apartment when I got there. Do the same thing with your car. Any issues that arise at that point, from that point on, now you can deal with them. And then at the end of season, this is the end of the solution, make sure you take that final video with the video proof of the date and all of that says, this is the state that I'm leaving things in. Yeah. So you have proof. I mean, this is really important. And Therese, maybe you have some comments on things that can happen in this realm where players have not done the right things with agents, maybe things you've heard of through your husband, or just, you know, as being a professional player.
All right. Yeah. Number one thing that I think that everyone has said. So if you're watching this and you're an athlete, all three of us have said this, four of us, the number one thing is not using your agent. That's what they're there for. So we as athletes, sometimes we don't want to be the crybaby, because we think that we're just supposed to suck it up all the time, that we're trained to do, you know, suck it up until you explode one day. You've been sucking it up, and then the coach says something and you just explode. So all of us have said it. That's why you have an agent. If something is bothering you, if something's going on in the team, it could be, you know, the coach is just down on me about this one thing. That's his job. He has no problem to go and negotiate that. Okay, this is, you know, she's something, and he'll do it in a way that you don't have to do it. He'll do it in a way that the coach doesn't know that you were complaining. That's his job. If you have a coach, if you have an agent that has gone to a coach and the coach has come back with you with feedback about what you said to your agent, then that's a problem you need to talk about with your agent, because he didn't do a very good job. Because there shouldn't be, when you go to your agent and you talk to him about a problem that you're having, he should be able, or she should be able to talk to the coach or to the management of the team without them feeling like you were offensive. You should be free to talk to your agent about whatever is going on that's upsetting you, because that's your vent. Don't go and vent to your players.
That's a really good point, because what happens is, sorry to interrupt you, they talk to their teammates and they're well, I don't like this. And it's like, so those teammates, you think that even translators, you think that translator's your BFF? That translator is not your best friend. And you can say something, it can be, misinterpreted. It could be a heat of the moment. That person is employed by the team. They go tell a team, and then all of a sudden you're in an episode of like Gossip Girls. It happens all the time.
And remember that a lot of times, and remember that a lot of times you're the hired player. So if we're talking about a foreigner going into another team, you are the money maker. So when you're the outsider, so you think you're talking to your teammates and you think you're all friends, but you are the outsider. You are not family. No matter how much they like it, and it's business. It's business when it comes down to it. So make sure you use your agent. That's what they're there for. Use them. I have situations where I got fired because I spoke up something that was true. It was honest. I said the truth, but that was not what should have been said at the time, and definitely not the place. And so you learn from my mistakes, you use your agent. I wanted to go home for Christmas. The coach was saying that he had lied to us and told us we were going home for Christmas. Now he said, we're not going home for Christmas. What? I'm not going to get to go home for Christmas. He didn't remember telling me that we were going home for Christmas because he was drunk. That's not the time to tell him that. So use your agent. All I had to do was go to my agent and say, this is what he said we were going to have. All of a sudden now he's not saying it. Never would have been an issue. We could have gotten that all smoothed out, all handled, and it wouldn't have been a problem. But instead, because I spoke up with something that was true, something that was right, wasn't meaning that wasn't right. It's just that I had an agent. I didn't have to do that. That's why you have an agent.
Just to interject before Matt, you take this up because I know you want to say something.
I just think it's the expectation. Like, this is why I say, like, you've got to understand where you are in the pecking order sometimes in team sports. Like, there's a reason that there's someone that faces on the poster. Like, there's a different expectation of that person. If you're the first, the last person to come into the roster, there's a different expectation on that. You've got to be aware of it. If you were saying you're the foreign player in that country, you are the money maker. There's a greater expectation on you. There's a greater expectation on you by your teammates. There's a greater expectation by you on the coach. There's a greater expectation by you on the sponsors. You've got to be aware of that. So you can't speak up all the time. You do have to use your agent for more things. So I think there's like a maturity. Like, I wish 30-year-old players could talk to more 19-year-old players and say to them, this is what's going to happen to you when you get older, because there is an expectation of you. It's part of the joys of being a professional athlete. You get a lot of perks, but you've got to be aware of what the expectations of you are by the people that are associated with that team. The stakeholders in that team have a say and an opinion about you. Just deal with it and find out your best way to deal with it. Your agent can be an enormous asset to deal with that.
Yeah, great advice there. And I want to pick up on two things. First of all, what Matt just said, not just handling this first, because I think it's important. You wish that 30-year-olds could speak with the 17-year-olds, or the 18, the 20-year-olds. Yeah. Well, the whole reason I'm here, the whole reason why I met Susan is because in creating Beyond Athletic podcast, I was trying to give a voice to the athlete community. And I want to create this mentorship network where we can all support each other and advise each other on, hey, these are the mistakes I made. Here are the common things that I've done that duplicated success. Here's how I failed and here's how I moved forward. Here's how I succeeded, or my biggest success, whether it was in sport or life. It's good for players to see this perspective. And then these athletes can give their contact info. They could say, tweet me, Facebook me, here's my email. I think Therese even gave her email when she was on the show. If you don't even know about Beyond Athletic podcast, you should. Why? Not just because I'm hosting it, and that's definitely not why, because I'm shy and I hate when people hear my voice. Even now I'm nervous, but you should hear it because you are going to get information that you cannot get from your personal circle unless you are around all of these Olympians and pros who have won medals and done crazy things like move abroad when they were 14 to go study alone or move, all these places. So there is a network that exists, Matt, and everybody else that's listening, and I want you to go check it out. Go to beyondathletic.com. You can hear those podcasts on iTunes, whatever. I bring experts on, for instance, both of you here, Karolina and Matt, I hope that you come on the podcast so we can talk about these things even more in depth. And then also there's a bigger project, which is linking global athletes around the world. It's called Elite Squared, or Elite Sports Students. I know this shameless plug because it's to help athletes, but this is literally going to be teaching athletes from a young age, hey, you have 4 areas of health: emotional, psychological, physical, and social. You need to build up these tanks of health because that's real health. And then I'm going to connect you with these athletes who have been on the show, who are just helping me out with Elite Squared and the whole group. And you are going to have mentorship. And you're going to learn what mentorship means, that you get coached from someone and advice, but you also advise. No matter what you know something that can help somebody else. And I know that's getting off on a big topic, but agents can handle only so much. And if you don't have that network and you don't know those people, reach out to them, tweet them, do whatever you can, like speak to people. So I love all the stuff that we just talked about. I know I got a little bit off there, but I'm pretty passionate about this. And I think that you guys have so much knowledge that we can utilize. What do you think? Let's move it forward to some options for players, because we're talking about agents, et cetera, and in certain cases, you might not want to use an agent. You might feel like you can do some things on your own. Like for instance, in my contracts, it's a choice whether or not you want me to handle your negotiations with your national team for volleyball players, or whether you want me to handle your endorsements. So you can opt in or opt out of those depending on who I'm writing this contract for. You need to know what you're coming against if you're going to go alone. So Karolina, if someone wants to go at this alone without professional help, what can they expect in terms of getting some of that job done, and what can they expect in coming up against problems?
Number one, I don't recommend it, but I think it's just I really don't think they would. You know what you're getting yourself into when you go in it alone, right? I mean, there's so many things like payment schedules and arrival dates and breaks, and are they going to pay for extra luggage? What happens if you get injured? What are they covering? What are they not covering? There's questions come into play that, and then if you do get injured, right, it can, and you're on your own, you got to negotiate your release agreement. I mean, that can be a little bit, high tense situation that you're just putting yourself in, and you're not aware. You don't know about the intricacies of negotiating your release. What if you have to sue them and take it to FIBA arbitration? You don't know that process, I would assume, unless you've done a lot of research. So you can expect a lot of difficulties, I think, at least in women's basketball, if you go at it alone. And a lot of people that do it, I don't know why. I mean, it's probably just in overseas basketball, you don't pay the agent. The agent gets paid by the team. So that's another thing too. So at least in women's basketball, I wouldn't understand why you would do it alone, because you're not directly paying your agent overseas. So it would make no sense in women's basketball to do it that way. But
same in rugby. It's exactly the same in rugby, and it's exactly the same in cricket. The money that they get, generally speaking, the money that they pay to an agent, even on domestic contracts, they get a really healthy tax break on as the cost of running a business. So it just makes no sense. I'm really fortunate in Sporple now. One of our advisors is Bill Duffy, who is one of the biggest sort of NBA agents of all time. And one of the other guys who advises is a guy called Parag Marate, who's the president of the 49ers. And both of them will say have agents. And that's on both sides of the equation. And that's like on US and global sports, to sort of reiterate my thoughts. The whole thing is, would you go and defend yourself in court without a lawyer? Absolutely not. Would you negotiate a contract that determines your livelihood and well-being for the next 2 to 3 years without an expert? It makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense to do it. Now, do you need an agent when you are 16 and going into college and all those sorts of things? Probably not. Like, there's a lot more of a welfare component around those decisions. It's a lot more, program based around what the college can do in terms of its development program, its coaching, its S&Cs, those sorts of things. There's education. There's all. Once you graduate from that, do not negotiate your first playing contract without an agent. You will live to regret it. And I'm not just talking about missing out on $10,000 or $20,000 in the playing contract. It's everything else that you just mentioned. It's what happens if you get injured. How do you negotiate your release? Like, what happens if your first contract's in a country where you don't speak any the language? All of those things. It just doesn't make any sense to do it. The
team just says, "I don't want you here anymore. Leave. You didn't score 20 points today. I don't want you on my roster." Yeah, they do that.
Parag on the other side, he's negotiating the contracts, and he's like, "I want an agent because I know the agent's done it a million times. I know that I can sit here and have a conversation with her, and I know that what we agree on will be executed at the other end. The player will forget details. The player's going to remember the one thing, that how much they get paid. They're not going to remember all the other bits and pieces to the story. The agent will do that, and they'll make sure all the other bits are tidied up so you can go back to doing what you want to do. That's eat, sleep, train, and be a professional athlete. It just doesn't make any sense.
Fantastic stuff. And I want to get the other side of the picture, because you're both in sports where it's regulated and where you have a lot of licensed agents, et cetera, and volleyball isn't there yet, like we talked about earlier, and Karolina mentioned basketball internationally was there 13, 15 years ago. So Therese, from your experience, how can you comment on this? And before you answer that, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you for viewing, everyone. Make sure if you have questions, you type them down there. All you have to do is a /Q and then type your question out. It'll come up on the left, and we will answer it here in about 5 minutes when we're ending. So Therese, go ahead.
So yeah, first, the year I didn't have any agent representation, the team that I was going to play for said that they wouldn't use an agent, that they didn't have the budget for an agent, and they didn't want to use the agent. And so that's why I went ahead and didn't do that. On hindsight now, it's not worth that contract. If that is your only contract where you will not have agent representation, then you pay your agent. Use an agent and tell the team that you will pay. Let me tell you why. That team that says that they will not work with an agent, if that's the only team that you have an option to play with, and you want to play professionally, then go ahead. It is worth your money. Usually your agent will work with you on that. They might even come down a little bit on their normal fee, because they realize that you recognize their importance and that you're probably going to use them the next year. They might want to sign a 2-year deal with you, meaning that the next year, then they're going to, if they send you somewhere else. But it is so worth it to you, because that same team that I did not use an agent for, later I was injured and they wanted to get rid of me. And thank goodness that I had the experience. This was toward the end of my career, that I had the experience that I had, and that I had learned the things that I did, and that the president of the team was very right standing. He was just a really good guy. So that worked out okay for me, but it could have gone really bad, really quick, because I'm not a lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer to negotiate with me. And the terrible thing about it was that I had to go in a board meeting with all of the people on the board for that team and defend myself. You never want to be in that position as an athlete. It feels terrible. You shouldn't have to be in that position, and that's why you have an agent. If I would have just hired an agent and paid the fee, then I wouldn't have had to do any of that, and it would have been beneficial to me the next year when I needed them. So really important, always use an agent, even if it means it comes out of your pocket. It's worth it in the future.
And just to pick that up where you left off, a few tips on that. So let's say that you are in that situation where you don't have an agent. You've chosen not to, and now you're sitting there in the same position as Therese mentioned. An option is at that point to grab somebody and or find someone in that country. For instance, being a player and having an agency. I mean, before I had a partner who was an ex-Olympian and a lawyer registered in California. So I had someone who could really support me. And then when I bought the business out, it was just me, so it was harder to do things like, for instance, when I flew overseas with Therese to negotiate a contract. But there's times where, for instance, in her case, with a European club, a very top club, huge name in the world, they did so many little things to try to set her up. And this is the next little topic that I want to end on, is they did so many things to set her up, turning the heat off in her apartment, turning lights out, electricity, not letting her know that they changed the time, changing it on purpose and telling the team not to tell her that they changed it, last minute, so she would miss an international flight to go play in a Champions League match. Things like this happen all the time. They'll say things like, we don't want to work with an agent. You need to know that these are red flags for teams that probably will misuse you or abuse you in some way, shape, or fashion. They might tell you, oh, I don't speak English, but they speak English. There's always workarounds if you are in the crap, let's say. You can find a way out. You just need to reach out to other people. Don't try to handle it alone. What are some of the common ways? I'll let you take this one, Karolina. What are some of the common ways that, let's see, I almost lost what I wanted to say there. but what are some of the common things that players should be looking for? Susan asked it. How do you find a fitting agent for your skills? So like, for instance, let's say that you're an entry-level player and you're looking for an agent, or you're a very high-level player. How do you choose that agent? What questions do you ask them?
Well, I would look at the roster of clients that they currently represent to see kind of where you fit in with those players. If maybe some of your teammates are represented by that particular agent or agency, that could be a good barometer for you to use. Also, it's not so much as you, but those agents are also calling you. So see who's calling you. Find out who is reaching out to you directly, because that also gives you kind of an indication of kind of where you fit, who's reaching out to you, right? So there are some players that I'll never reach out to, but they reach out to my office. That, you kind of know. And if you call my office and I'll tell you right now, like, yeah, you're not kind of on my radar right now, then you know that you're probably not someone that I'm particularly interested with. Agents typically know who they want to represent, at least in women's basketball. Like right now it's March Madness. We have a list. We have a list of players that we're particularly, going after. And, it's kind of ask those questions. Am I on your list? Am I on your radar? And that's a straightforward, simple question. And if that person cannot answer it for you, they kind of give you the runaround, then, you know that that's pretty much an indication of, that you don't fit in that agency, or that they're not, looking at you particularly. I would also have the player themselves call. A lot of what's happening now is parents are calling. And, every parent thinks that their kid is going to be the next, Diana Taurasi in women's basketball. And, my kid is going to be this and that. And that's great. I don't mind talking to parents. I love it. That's fine. I can educate them as well. But I want to hear from the player, not so much the parent. Players need to be the ones asking the questions. They need to be the ones doing the research. Talk to your former teammates. Find out, hey, you were represented by this agency. Did you like it? Do you like your time with them? What were the pros and cons of working? Because there's cons and pros to each agent and agency. So ask those questions. Find out, do I fit in with their style of representation? Those are the things that I would kind of consider.
Excellent. And Matt?
I think you've nailed it. I think, most agents don't want to represent players that they can't place or they can't work with. So it's a sort of a dead relationship both sides. So the point to go and ask the agent, am I on your radar? That's a great start. If you're looking to what agents to approach, though, I don't think there's ever a situation where if you're a junior player, you want a junior athlete. I think if you're a junior player, you want the most senior athlete that's got an interest in you, because they've had more experience, they've got bigger contact network. The number of players they have is often a good indication of the amount of market knowledge an agent will have. If an agent's got 2 or 3 players, they don't know what's going on. We were lucky enough to represent about 40% of the Australian rugby market at one point, and players used to come to us and say, "Do you have too many clients?" And at some players,
we get to.
we probably did have that. Like I had 40% of the playing squad in one country. So, but what it meant then is I knew who was on contract, who was off contract, who was going overseas. If I picked up the phone and called any of the GMs, any of the coaches, the national coach, whoever, they took your call. They were able to tell me who was in favour, who was out of favour, who they were letting go. So I don't think there's ever a situation if you're a junior player, you go for a junior agent. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have a support team in your office? So you said 40%. Like in our office, we represent a good portion of the WNBA players. Listen, my boss is not handling every single player. We have a complete team in our office that is working for you. It's my boss. It's me. It's my other agent. There's multiple people.
And that's the beauty of it. Like if the player picks up the phone, who answers the phone call? That's what they need to know. If there are 3 other people working to make sure that their finances are sorted, their contract stuff, their boots are going to be delivered on time, all of those sorts of stuff, they don't want to know about it. Like as an agent, as a player, you just want to know, if I pick up the phone call, are you going to answer my phone call? What's my response going to be? And if I ask you a question now, and I say, if you're in the WNBA, if I want to know who's going to move on in my position in the next 2 or 3 years, you should know that, and I'm sure you do. But if I didn't have that answer for my player, I would say, look, give me 24 hours. I can ring every club, and I will know the succession plan.
I will call you back.
And I will call you back. So
and they wait by the phone for that phone call, so you better call back.
Of course they do. And I think that's the other thing. Like I think it's what I mentioned originally. Like some players are going to be those players who are going to call you every week to check out, how your mum is, and they're amazing players. They don't happen often, but they do. Other players you don't hear from for 18 months, 2 years, and then they pick up and they will stalk your phone and they will pick up every call you make them when their contracts are up. So you're going to get both sides. But as a player, when you are approaching an agency, I'd never go for a small agency. It's a personal choice. It's because I've seen this enormous benefit global information and market knowledge has, regardless of who you are. I've had to tell players, there's no deal here for the next 3 years in Australia. It's not happening. Like, it's hard news. They've got their dream setting on playing for Australia, but you got to tell them, you've got to go overseas and make your mark. Now, if I didn't know what was going on in France or Japan, all those countries, I couldn't do it. So, if we've got a big agency that wants to represent you, go for it.
Oh, thank you. And just to interject there, and I mean, we're getting great perspectives here because we have Karolina Blanco, who's dealing with WNBA players and foreign basketball league players. I think you're dealing with only women, right?
I personally, my involvement with the company is with the women, yes.
Okay. And then we have Mathew Cole at Sporple, who's dealing in rugby. And we have Therese, who played volleyball, and myself, who plays volleyball, and I have a small agency in volleyball. And I would like to say that if you're talking about it from a perspective of big or small agency in volleyball, there are a couple of questions that you need to be asking because, like I said, it's not regulated the same way. We don't have the same, support system. You want to definitely look for somebody who has people that you can reach out to, whether they are people who have terminated. So I ask players, ask me who has terminated a contract with me and contact them. Ask somebody who's on with me and talk with them. Get both sides of the story. See who works for you and how, because in volleyball, it's a totally different animal. And the way that deals are done, it's either really, you got a ton of paper pushers who are allowed to be around, and you don't have that with, I think, rugby and basketball. And so you need to be careful about that. And small agency could work, but like you said, if you got like 2, 3, 4 players, come on. It's probably not somebody who's really doing a good job. Or if their roster of players that they've worked with in the past does not include high-level players, national team-level players, like Therese Crawford, then do not think about it as strongly as someone else. So just wrapping up here, last 3 minutes. I want each of you just to take about 45 seconds tops to give like why you think, what your advice is to athletes out there trying to find agents and moving forward. Take it away, Therese, first.
Okay, first thing I would do is look at their list of players, like the other person said, and are those people on your caliber? Second thing I would do is that person full-time as an agent? Because if it's full-time, that means they know who has the players, who else has players. They're not stepping on somebody else's toes, and they know the business, they know the market, and they're going to be the best for you, and they're going to be available to you. And then the third thing I would do is know where you line up on their roster. So one thing is if they're pursuing you and you go into them, you want to be loyal, because this is something I wish I would have known. I'm going to say it really fast, but you want to be loyal. Find an agent that you can depend on and then stay loyal, because you will move up in ranks as you're loyal to them. So if they're working for you, don't go to the highest bidder. I don't care if it's 10,000, because later in your career, you're going to need that agent to work for you and make deals. And they'll stick with you if you've done it. This is coming from somebody who has a husband as an agent now and didn't know this before. I had 3 agents. Listen, stick with the agent. If he's working for you, don't go by the deal. And if it's a couple of thousand here or there, 10,000, because later in your career, you're going to need somebody to open up those deals. And if you were loyal to them, they'll be loyal to you.
Thank you. And Karolina?
I think the best thing is to do research and communicate. And don't start late. Don't wait till your senior year, a week before you're done, to start to figure out who's who and what's going on. Start earlier. Start maybe going into your senior year. Get the facts, do your research, and set up conference calls with multiple agents that are that you are interested in, that are equally interested in you, and ask questions. And no question is a dumb question. It's a learning experience, and there's a learning curve. There's a learning curve for you. There's a learning curve for the agent. And go with someone that you also feel comfortable with. You want to feel comfortable picking up that phone. And sometimes the conversations aren't going to be about money. They're going to be about life situations. Maybe you had a death in the family. Can you see yourself calling your agent in the middle of the night saying, hey, listen, I'm going through a hard time right now. My grandmother died. Can you help me get out of this situation? So just follow your heart at the end of the day, too. You want to feel comfortable with who you're working with and have some trust.
Thank you. And last but not least, Matt Cole at Sporple.
First thing I do is work out, like, try and be as self-actualized as possible. So if you're a 16-year-old, do you need an agent? So try and plan your career a bit. Like, it's like career planning in any other sort of form of life or profession. So be realistic when you need an agent. And I completely agree with Karolina. Don't go and try and find an agent 2 weeks before the draft, or don't try and find an agent 2 weeks before you're trying to do a deal. It's not realistic. Build the relationship. If you're a talented 16, 17-year-old player, start having conversations with multiple agents. So the time comes when you're 20 and you do need to make that decision, you've almost got 3 years of dialogue and relationship with someone. But really look at what you are as an athlete, what the agency represents, who you want to be represented by, because when you're not involved in a meeting, how's that person going to represent you? This person is actually your face when you're not around. So be very conscious of that. I've seen agents who are not very moral and ethical, and I wouldn't want to be represented by them, even though they do very good deals. Yeah. So I think that's something you should be, keep in sort of context the whole time. I totally agree with the relationship part. Yeah. Like, you have to be able to pick up the phone, call this person when, your girlfriend broke up with you and, you've lost your dog. That's going to happen. Yeah. So
this is great advice. I mean, really, I want to interject there. Sorry to cut you off, but we have to go to the next session. There's been so much great advice here. And if you want to know any more information, click on their name, get info on them, look through the chat. We put their links. And this next session up is what are your plans after sports? So go ahead and click that link that's just been posted and get on over there. Thank you all so much for your time. Make sure you share this via your networks.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Hang up.
I got to do it people by people. Bye-bye.